At dawn, beneath a locked salvage-yard gate, an alien envoy placed her broken diplomatic collar in the mud where every camera could see it. Two ordinary humans held the gate open with shaking hands while an empire ordered them to step aside. They had no weapons, no rank, and no reason to risk everything. Except that someone had tried to erase a person, and they refused to look away. Welcome to Intergalactic Untold. I hope you enjoy the video and have a day filled with happiness. Now, let's begin this quiet story of courage, truth, and humanity. The Alliance cruiser did not land over Kestrel Yard. It waited above the Missouri cloud deck, a pale shape behind the rain, quiet enough to make the whole night feel instructed. Caleb Rourke stood under Bay 12's service awning with a clipboard nobody would read and a thermos of coffee that had gone bad before sunset. The salvage lanes stretched ahead in crooked rows of dead courier hulls, stripped cargo pods, and colonial engines resting on concrete blocks like tired cattle. Rain mixed with red dust blown in from the West Flats, turning the asphalt into rust-colored paste. Every floodlight wore a dirty halo. Every camera blinked like it was deciding whether to remember. His radio cracked against his belt. "Caleb, you getting feed loss on West Fence?" Ron Bell asked from the main gate, trying to sound older than 26. Camera 6 keeps stuttering again. Caleb looked toward the dark lens over the maintenance door. Camera 6 had stuttered since Tuesday, which made it one of the more honest machines on the property. "Write what you see, Ron. Not what they want clean." A pause. Rain hissed through the radio on Ron's end. "Last time I did that, Danner put me in a meeting with 3 people who smiled. That's how you know you scared them." Ron gave half a laugh and lost it. Cruisers requesting full yard sink. Caleb watched the low clouds pulse where the ship drifted lower. "Tell Customs our sink is old enough to vote. That's not a category. It is in Missouri." He clipped the radio back and walked the west lane, left knee clicking every third step. Iowa had given him that knee when he was 13, pinned under a tractor frame while his father dug mud away with bare hands. Later, in a county hospital that smelled like bleach and burnt toast, his father told him fear was fine as long as it didn't get the final vote. Caleb had spent 40 years proving that sentence useful and expensive. The West Fence snapped blue-white. Not a radar contact. He stopped between 2 stacked haulers and saw her kneeling in the mud beside the perimeter wire. Tall, silver-blue skin under a torn gray cloak. One hand pressed a hard case to her ribs. The other hovered near the fence, fingers burned where the current had kissed them. Around her throat sat the remains of a diplomatic collar. White ceramic split down the front, the seal bead cut out so cleanly it looked surgical. Unknown biological cargo. Armed response. Civilian contact voided insurance. Caleb had read the memo that afternoon while eating a gas station burrito over the breakroom sink. The words came back now in clean blue letters, useless as a hymn on a sinking boat. The woman lifted her face. She was not begging. That made it worse. She was measuring how much of herself she could keep while the yard decided what she was allowed to be. Caleb's radio barked again. "West Fence Spike," Ron said. "Customs wants confirmation. You see anything?" Caleb's thumb found the talk button. He looked at the woman, then at the cruiser glow, then at camera 6, its red light steady for the first time all week. His daughter Emma had once frozen in a St. Louis mall after a fire alarm misfired. Security called her a disturbance before Caleb reached her. He still remembered her small hands over her ears, strangers waiting for policy to grow a heart. It hadn't. Caleb released the button without speaking. The perimeter box hummed 20 feet away, padlocked and wet. He crossed to it, chose the manual cutoff key, and turned it before better judgment could put on a clean shirt. The fence died with a soft click that seemed too small for the law it broke. The woman's dark eyes found him through the ring. Caleb kept both hands visible and stayed 6 feet back. "Don't run," he said. "I'm too old to chase anybody." She did not move. The hard case ticked once against her ribs, some tiny internal mechanism adjusting to the cold. Caleb shrugged off his canvas work jacket and laid it in the mud between them, close enough to reach, not close enough to threaten. "Maintenance door's got a blind camera," he said. "Break room has bad coffee, a sink, and no official witnesses unless Ron grows a spine early." Her burned fingers closed on the jacket. She rose inch by inch, forcing collapse to look like choice. Above them, The cruiser's search beam swept the cloud base and turned the rain white. Caleb opened the service gate and stepped aside. He did not know her name. He did not know what she carried. He only knew a person at an electrified fence should not have to prove she was a person before someone killed the current. Caleb brought her through the maintenance door and locked it with the old thumb latch instead of the electronic seal, because electronic seals kept records and thumb latches only kept weather honest. The break room greeted them with the dull hum of a vending machine, the smell of burnt coffee, and rain ticking against a window repaired with clear tape and optimism. A faded Cardinals calendar hung crooked above the sink. Someone had written "Quit touching my mug" on the whiteboard, and under it, in Ron's careful block letters, "Define touching." The woman stopped 3 steps inside and counted the room without moving her lips. Door, window, microwave cord. Caleb's limp. The metal coffee pot heavy enough to break a hand. He let her count. People did better when they knew where the exits were. He set his thermos on the counter, opened the cabinet above the sink, and took down the first aid kit. Her burned hand tightened around the hard case. Caleb placed the kit on the table instead of carrying it to her. "You do it," he said. "I'll stand over here and disappoint the coffee." The damaged translator under her split collar sparked once, a weak blue flash against broken ceramic. Her voice came through thin, clipped, almost American, but too careful around the edges. "You disabled a perimeter grid during an Alliance recovery operation." Caleb poured tap water into a paper cup and let it sit on the far end of the table. "That's one way to describe opening a gate. Your law will not describe it kindly. Law doesn't do much kindly after midnight." She looked at the cup, then at him, then at the ceiling camera with its lens turned toward the wrong corner. "That camera is blind. Lazy, technically. You chose this room. I chose the room that wouldn't introduce you to people with clipboards." The radio on Caleb's belt hissed before she could answer. Ron's voice came low and careful. "Caleb, Customs says the west spike matches contact with the fence. They're asking if you logged a biological breach." The woman went still. Not frozen. Braced. Caleb unclipped the radio and held it near his chest. He could hear rain on Ron's end, the main gate canopy rattling above him. "What did you see?" Caleb asked. Ron hesitated. Feed glitched. Then current dropped. Then it came back as a maintenance override. Then write that. They don't want that. Caleb watched the woman's burned fingers hover over the first aid latch, unwilling to open it, while anyone spoke her fate into a machine. "Ron, remember the South Crane report?" Another pause, heavier. "Yeah. You wrote the break was failing. Danner wrote operator error. Then it failed on Manny 2 days later. Manny was lucky. Manny was ignored." Static breathed between them. Caleb lowered his voice. "Write what you saw. Not what they want clean." Ron exhaled. "Copy. Maintenance irregularity. No confirmed visual." Before the channel clicked off, he added, quieter, "Customs hates this yard anyway. Too many analog logs. Too many public observer clauses." Then he was gone. The woman stared at Caleb as if the exchange had opened a door she did not trust. He will be punished for that. Probably with another meeting where people smile. "You make light of risk." "No," Caleb said, rinsing an old mug he did not need. "I make it smaller so it fits in my hands." She looked away first. That felt less like victory than permission to keep breathing. With her good hand, she opened the kit, rejected half of it, then selected sterile gel, gauze, and a narrow wrap. Her burned fingers trembled only when the gel touched skin. Caleb turned his back and pretended to read the vending machine labels. "Pretzels are safe," he said. "Beef sticks are a dare." "Why are you speaking of food?" "Because you're trying not to make a sound." Behind him, plastic crinkled. A short breath broke and vanished. "You are observant for a maintenance worker. Maintenance is mostly noticing what breaks before it admits it." The hard case clicked once, softer than before. Caleb did not turn. "That thing need cold or heat?" Silence. Then, neither. "It requires time." Caleb nodded at the rain-streaked window, where the cruiser glow moved behind the clouds. "That's the one part one don't keep in storage." She finished wrapping her hand and stood with his jacket around her shoulders, too proud to sit, too tired to hide it well. "I cannot give you my name." "Didn't ask." "You should. Names make forms easier." "I'm trying to avoid forms." The damaged translator sparked again, and for the first time her mouth almost bent into something the night had not completely killed. Caleb slid the paper cup a few inches closer and stepped back. This time she took it. She drank like water was a negotiation she hated losing. Outside, a patrol cart rolled past the window, tires whispering through wet grit. Both of them listened until it faded. Caleb picked up a kestrel sweatshirt from the back of a chair and laid it on the table, not touching her side of it. You need to get out of that cloak before someone sees the collar. Her eyes cut to his. You noticed. Hard not to notice when somebody cuts the seal off a person and hopes the whole does the talking. The room changed around that sentence. The vending machine hummed. The rain kept tapping. Her hand closed over the sweatshirt, but she did not put it on yet. If I walk out of this room, she said, you become part of whatever follows. Caleb looked at the blind camera, the manual latch, and the wet footprints she had left on the floor, proof enough for anyone who wanted him guilty. Ma'am, he said, I already opened the gate. The patrol cart passed the break room window twice before the room allowed itself to make small sounds again. First, the vending machine compressor kicked on with a tired clunk. Then the old wall clock resumed its 3-minute late ticking above the Cardinals' calendar. Then the woman's breath, careful and shallow, as if even air could be subpoenaed. Caleb pulled the blinds down one bent slat at a time. Carts circling east, he said. They'll check the fence box, blame the rain, then decide whether trouble needs a signature. She had put on the kestrel sweatshirt, but not the ball cap. The sleeves covered most of the bandage. The hard case sat on the table between them, both of her hands still touching it. Your guard knows more than he reported. Ron knows what reporting costs. And still he did not confirm me. Caleb glanced at her. Some folks learn late that a clean form can still be dirty. That sentence stayed in the room longer than he meant it to. She looked at the case, and something behind her eyes folded inward. Then she opened it. The latch did not click. It exhaled. Inside, a cylinder lay in black shock foam, shorter than a flashlight, wrapped in dull amber glass. No buttons. No markings. At one end, a sliver of white ceramic matched the broken collar at her throat. When she touched that sliver, the cylinder lit from within. A thin grid of light spread across the scratched table, bright enough to turn the old coffee stains into continents. Caleb leaned forward, then stopped before curiosity became trespass. The projection resolved into columns. Route K, 117. Juvenile Educational Transport. Local reassignment, 0600. Status pending. Beside it, a second column flickered, relocated. A third blinked colder, deceased. Same names. Same ages. Same clean transport codes. Caleb's mouth went dry. One line carried a signature tag. Dismissal review. V. Nareth. Another flashed red. Authentication incomplete. Diplomatic seal removed. The woman stared at the signature like it had been carved into her hand. I signed the dismissals before I knew what the second column meant, she said. Caleb did not offer comfort. Comfort would have made it about him. He looked instead at the rows of children reduced to route numbers, at the duplicate columns pretending not to accuse each other. One entry pulsed faintly near the bottom. Nareth, Ivan. Age equivalent, 11. Route K, 117. Reassignment pending, 0600. Caleb thought of Emma's school bus app in St. Louis, the little yellow that he used to watch even after she was old enough to roll her eyes at him. A child on a map looked so simple until the dot stopped moving. Brother, he asked. Her fingers tightened against the case. He takes broken navigation toys apart and repairs them incorrectly. Then he insists the mistakes are alternate routes. Sounds 11. He is unbearable. Her voice almost held. Almost. The projection shifted when she touched the cylinder again. 3 amber threads appeared, braided but separate. One carried the ledger. One carried an authentication hash tied to the missing seal. One carried a dead key witness file from the courier who had tried to extract her before customs cut her collar and erased the bead. A sealed petition is already inside the independent tribunal system, she said. It has been waiting for proof the Alliance cannot edit. Caleb nodded toward the threads. That's proof. That is math. Math is harder to intimidate. Outside, the cruiser's pressure hum rolled through the wall, making the coffee pot tremble on the counter. The projection fluttered but held. Caleb looked past the blinds toward the salvage lanes, where dead courier hulls sat under rain with old antenna scars along their backs. Now he understood why she had chosen Kestrel Yard. Not because it was safe. Because it still had machines too obsolete to obey the people chasing her. The radio battery on the table clicked from residual charge, and Ron's broken voice bled through for half a second. Caleb, customs moving west, asking old courier inventory. Static swallowed the rest. The woman closed the case with both hands, slower now, as if sealing a room full of children inside it. Caleb went to the maintenance locker and pulled out a dented tablet, a grease-stained ball cap, and a safety vest with one reflective stripe peeling loose. He set them on the table. You're about to become a night systems auditor. She looked at the vest. That color is a crime. Good. Nobody questions regulation ugly. She took the cap, still watching him as if trust remained too expensive to spend all at once. You still do not know my name. Caleb picked up his tool bag. I know enough for the next door. The safety vest made her look less hidden and more official, which was the whole ugly trick. Caleb adjusted the peeling reflective stripe with 2 fingers, then handed her the dead tablet from the locker. Auditors look bored, he said. Not hunted. Bored. She slid the hard case under one arm and studied the tablet's cracked screen. This device has no power. Neither do most auditors. The damaged translator under her collar gave a faint spark, and her mouth tightened like she was deciding whether the joke deserved survival. She tucked her silver-white hair beneath the ball cap. The cap shadowed her eyes, but nothing could disguise the way she held herself, spine straight, shoulders still, every movement measured for rooms where a misplaced glance could start a diplomatic incident. Caleb opened the maintenance door and checked the lane. Rain had softened into a thin mist. The salvage yard no longer roared. It clicked, dripped, and breathed through hanging chains, loose panels, and coolant lines cooling too fast in the morning chill. Above the cloud deck, the cruiser's pressure hum pressed against puddles until they trembled. Caleb stepped out first, tool bag bumping his thigh, bad knee making his pace uneven. She followed half a step behind. Too exact. Too graceful. Don't match my limp, he muttered. I am not. You are. You are slow. That's different. Something nearly became a laugh behind him, then chose caution. They passed between 2 stripped grain haulers where the smell of wet insulation and old hydraulic fluid clung to the air. Caleb lifted the dead tablet toward camera 6 and tapped it with irritated authority. Machines failed more believably when a tired worker looked mad at them. Halfway to the parts cage, Ron stepped out from behind a forklift with a flashlight in one hand and rain bright on his jacket sleeves. He looked at Caleb first, then at the vest, then at the hard case tucked under her arm. His face did not change much. That was how Caleb knew he had seen too much. Customs is asking why Bay 12 shows manual cutoff, Ron said. Caleb stopped with enough annoyance to look innocent. Because Bay 12 had wet arc variants. Ron's flashlight tilted toward the woman. Who's that? Night Systems Auditor. We have those. We do when an Alliance cruiser parks over us and starts sniffing wires. The woman tapped the dead tablet without looking up. Her voice came through flatter now, clipped into bureaucratic boredom. Your West Fence isolation log is incomplete. If Customs pulls raw current variants before maintenance annotation, this facility absorbs liability. Ron blinked. What? Caleb nodded like the sentence had made perfect sense. Auditor for move your ass. Ron looked from her covered collar to the case, then back to Caleb. His flashlight dipped, rose, then dipped again. The choice moved through him in small visible pieces. Fear, curiosity, memory. A young man trying to decide whether seeing meant owning what came next. Finally, he turned the light toward the coolant tanks instead. Officer Hale's coming for old courier inventory, he said quietly. 5 minutes. Maybe less. Caleb gave him the smallest nod he could. Log us checking mast grounding. That'll make a mess. Good. Messes take reading. Ron stepped aside. As they passed, his beam caught the edge of the woman's bandage where her sleeve had slipped. He saw the burn. He saw the hand tighten on the case. He did not finish seeing. Oil patch by cage 3, he said louder. Manny almost ate concrete there last week. Caleb kept walking. Thanks could become evidence. At the parts cage, the padlock fought him with wet stubbornness before giving way. Inside, spare antenna rods, chain loops, and cracked pressure gauges hung in rows that threw narrow shadows across the concrete. Caleb set down his tool bag and pulled out fresh gauze. Hand. We do not have time. You bleed on the case. Ron's flashlight gets curious twice. That worked where concern had not. She gave him her burned hand. Caleb wrapped it quickly, touching only what the bandage required. Her eyes stayed on the lane Ron had returned to. He saw some of it. He chose not to finish. Caleb tore the tape with his teeth and smoothed it down. That's a choice people practice before they know what it costs. She looked at him then, Cap's shadow cutting her face in half. Vale, she said. Just that. No title. No family. Caleb stepped back and picked up his tool bag. All right, Vale. Beyond the cage, the old courier bay door shifted in the mist and answered with a hollow metal creak, as if something dead had heard its name called. The old courier bay had no electronic lock because nobody with a budget had cared about it in 7 years. Caleb shoved the rolling door with his shoulder, then stopped when the bottom rail caught on warped concrete. Vale watched him lean into it, jaw set, one hand braced against wet metal, bad knee refusing the angle. The door moved 3 inches and screamed like something dragged out of sleep. Your facility maintains critical assets poorly, she said. This isn't critical. Caleb shoved again. This is what critical becomes after accounting stops loving it. The door jumped the crack and rolled open far enough for them to slip inside. The bay smelled different from the yard. Less rain, more cold oil, dust baked into wire insulation, and the flat metallic breath of old pressure seals. A narrow courier hull rested under a torn tarp in the center of the space, 30 feet nose to tail, black paint dulled to charcoal. One wing had been removed. The other hung from a ceiling rigged by 2 chains and more hope than engineering. Faded letters along the side read, Aurora Medical Express. Someone had scraped off the route number years ago, but the ghost of it remained, a pale rectangle where official identity had once been. Vale stopped at the markings. Caleb noticed. He pretended to fight with the work lamp cord until the moment passed. People deserved at least one silence they did not have to defend. Yellow light crawled over the hull and caught 3 antenna scars along the dorsal spine. Caleb pointed with a screwdriver. There. Old burst mast housing. Analog. Pre-sync era. It talks before it asks permission. Vale moved closer, her expression sharpening from survival into work. Not integrated with Alliance Customs routing. Not unless somebody upgraded it. He pulled the tarp loose and coughed when dust lifted. And nobody upgraded anything in here except the mice. A non-networked mast could bypass cruiser packet inspection. Could is doing considerable labor. So am I. Caleb climbed through the side hatch with a grunt and dropped into the cabin. The floor flexed under his boots. Vale handed in the case before entering, then caught herself half a second too late. Fingers tightening after it had already left her grasp. Caleb held it flat in both hands and set it on the dead navigator's console without opening it. No curiosity, no claim. When Vale climbed in after him, her eyes moved first to the case, then to Caleb. Something small shifted there. Not trust. A chalk mark on the road toward it. The cabin barely gave them room to stand. Stripped panels exposed colored wires overhead. The pilot's seat sat sideways, foam spilling from the cushion. Caleb removed the transmitter cover beneath the console and revealed a rack of ceramic coils, copper bridges, cracked insulators, and dust-clogged relays. Good news, he said. It's ugly. Vale crouched beside him. That is good news. Ugly means original. Original means no smart lock, no remote kill, no friendly software deciding we're criminals. She unfolded her black glass device over the console. Its surface opened in 3 thin leaves, each displaying a separate amber thread. The packet will split into 3 redundant shards. Ledger. Authentication hash. Dead key witness file. If one shard fails, the tribunal receives only a corruption alert. Caleb reached into his tool bag and pulled out insulated wire, 2 alligator clips, and an analog meter with a cracked face. The needle twitched when he clipped it to the coil bank. Vale watched his hands. You have used this system before. Not this one. He tapped the rack. But crop satellites get old and mean too. My brother fixed relay boxes outside Ames. I held the flashlight, passed the wrong wrench, got called useless, and learned anyway. Agricultural satellites taught you diplomatic evidence transmission. They taught me signals don't care who needs them. They care about line, noise, power, and whether somebody keeps the needle steady. Vale absorbed that without giving him the satisfaction of seeing where it landed. Then she reached across him, careful not to brush his shoulder, and connected 2 filaments from her device into the transmitter's diagnostic port. The rack answered with a low electric murmur. The work lamp flickered. Outside, a patrol cart rolled past, tires hissing over wet concrete. Both of them froze until the sound faded. Caleb adjusted the tuner. The needle climbed, dipped, climbed again. It drifts, Vale said. Badly. Everything does. Every 6 seconds, the mast will wander off the burst window. I can correct relay phase, but not mechanical variance. Caleb lowered himself onto one knee despite the pain and placed 2 fingers on the tuner knob. The needle steadied just below green. Then I'll be the mechanical variance. The rain softened on the roof. The cruiser hum pressed down through the bay walls like a hand trying to find a pulse. For the first time, Vale looked at Caleb not as shelter, risk, or useful accident, but as a man who knew how to hold a failing thing in place long enough for it to matter. 48 seconds, she said. Caleb eased the needle into green. Long enough to lose a crop, he said. Long enough to save a bus. Caleb held the tuner with 2 fingers because gripping it made the needle jump. The old courier did not want force. It wanted patience, the same way a busted fence hinge wanted oil before a hammer, the same way Emma wanted silence before questions. The transmitter rack breathed a rough electric note through the cabin, low and uneven, while Vale's black glass device opened its 3 amber threads across the dead navigator's console. Ledger. Authentication hash. Dead key witness file. 3 small lights for 3 ways the truth could fail. Power in 12 seconds, Vale said. Her voice had lost the thin edge of panic. Work had given her somewhere to put it. Caleb liked that about tools. They did not care how scared your hands were if the hands kept moving. He watched the analog meter tremble below green. Tell me when. Not yet. She adjusted a filament with her bandaged hand and drew one sharp breath through her teeth. Caleb looked at the wire bundle above her shoulder instead of the pain. You need that hand. I need all of me. Fair. The cruiser hum deepened outside, vibrating through the old hull and into Caleb's knee. Vale's device displayed a scatter of possible burst corridors, thin lines spidering over the glass. Most glowed red. 2 blinked yellow. 1 pulsed green, then amber. Caleb pointed with his chin. That one good. Fastest route to the tribunal intake mirror. Why is it labeled school transport? Vale's fingers stopped. The cabin seemed to shrink around the amber light. It is only the corridor shell. The registration marker can mask our burst inside routine civilian telemetry. Caleb took his hand off the tuner. The needle slid left at once. Vale snapped her eyes to him. Do not release the variance. Not through a school bus. It is not an actual vehicle. It's a name. A discarded route shell. That's still a name. Outside, a patrol cart passed close enough for its tires to hiss beneath the bay door. Vale leaned toward him, keeping her voice low and hard. If this packet does not transmit, actual children disappear from actual routes. Caleb put his fingers back on the tuner, but did not move it yet. Then we don't save them by borrowing another kid's paperwork. You think ethics survives failure? He eased the needle toward green, slow enough to make her wait with him. I think if the first thing the tribunal sees is us hiding under a school route, they'll know the math and smell the rot anyway. Vale stared at him. Anger flashed first, then calculation, then something worse, recognition. She looked back at the route shell, and for half a breath Caleb saw the part of her that had signed clean dismissals because clean papers had once felt like order. There is a weather buoy corridor, she said. Longer, narrower. It requires checksum correction. Does it belong to anybody's kid? It belongs to a storm station in Kansas. Kansas can take it. Kansas may disagree. Kansas always does. Her mouth tightened, not quite humor, not quite forgiveness. Her fingers moved fast now, stripping the civilian marker from the packet path, preserving the legal checksum, folding the 3 shards into a weather telemetry shell ugly enough to pass as old infrastructure and clean enough not to steal a face. The transmitter whined. Caleb eased the tuner right until the needle kissed green. The first amber thread launched. Handshake, Vale whispered. Clock starts now. The cabin lights dimmed. 6 seconds. Vale tapped the relay. Caleb held the needle steady while the vibration tried to walk it out from under his fingers. 12 seconds. The second shard jumped, stuttered, then cleared. A knock sounded somewhere beyond the bay door, metal on metal, casual enough to be dangerous. Caleb. Ron called from outside. Officer Hale wants courier inventory opened. Caleb raised his voice without taking his eyes off the meter. In the middle of mass grounding? A pause. Rain ticked from the roof, seam onto the hull. 18 seconds. Vale corrected the relay again, her burned hand shaking now, not from fear, but from damaged nerves. Caleb slid his thermos across the console until it touched her wrist. Not holding her, just giving her something that would not move. She used it. 24 seconds. Ron said something muffled to another voice. Officer Hale answered, polished and close. Mr. Rourke, open this bay. Caleb turned the tuner a hair left. The needle steadied. Door rails jammed. You want it open, file a two-person lift. 30 seconds. The third shard entered the line and broke into static. Vale's eyes widened. She rerouted through the buoy shell, lips moving around numbers she did not say aloud. 36. The shard reformed, amber going white at the edges. Hold it, she said. Caleb's fingers cramped. He held it. 42. The bay lock beeped as someone tried an override. The transmitter gave a sound like a lung filling for the last time. 48. Vale struck the final command. The 3 amber threads vanished into one thin green line. Receipt pending. Injunction not active. Caleb let the tuner go only after the rack powered down. His hand stayed curled in the air, useless for a second. Vale closed the case around an empty slot where the cylinder had already spent itself. Outside, Officer Hale knocked again, no longer pretending patience. Caleb looked at the green pending line, then at Vale. That mean we won? Vale's face held no victory. It means the court heard a doorbell. The bay lock beeped a second time. Ron's voice came through the metal, smaller than before. Caleb, they're not asking anymore. The override failed with a blunt red chirp, then failed again, and for one strange second the old bay door showed more resistance than anyone inside it. Caleb slid the empty access panel over the transmitter rack and nudged a loose coil of wire beneath the pilot seat with his boot. Vale folded her black glass device into a strip no thicker than a ruler and tucked it inside the Kestrel sweatshirt. The case stayed on the console between them, too clean now, too light, a shell after the truth had already left. Do not hide it, Vale said. Caleb looked at her. That's the first thing they'll take. Let them see it is empty. Officer Hale's voice came through the metal, smooth enough to make threats sound like procedure. Mr. Rourke, this is now an Alliance compliance inspection. Stand clear of the door. Ron said something outside, low and quick. Hale answered with one clipped syllable. Caleb moved toward the manual chain, then stopped. He could drop the door if they forced it. He could run Vale through the rear drainage panel. He could dress fear up as a plan and still call it courage. Vale stepped down from the courier first. Her cap sat crooked, her bandaged hand hanging at her side, fingers curled but steady. She did not look saved. She looked like someone counting the cost before signing her name. The bay door groaned upward 6 inches, then a foot. Ron ducked under first with his flashlight aimed at the floor. That mattered. Officer Hale followed in a charcoal coat beaded with rain, tablet in one white-gloved hand, 2 customs agents behind her carrying sealed scanners. Hale's eyes swept the bay once and found every lie by shape. Step away from the vessel. Caleb did, slowly, tool bag in hand. Floors wet near the mast rack. Boots rated for old wiring would be smart. Hill did not look down. We detected an unauthorized burst from this structure. Old transmitter burped when I grounded it. With tribunal-grade encryption? Caleb scratched his jaw. These old girls surprise you. Ron's flashlight trembled once, then steadied. Hale turned toward him. Officer Bell, illuminate the cockpit. Ron raised the light. Its beam crossed the torn pilot's seat, the cracked console, Caleb's muddy boot prints, then caught the empty case. Vale stood half behind the hatch, visible now if someone wanted to finish seeing. Ron froze. Hale saw the freeze before she saw Vale. There, Hale said. Confirm visual. The words landed on Ron like a hand between his shoulder blades. Caleb watched the young guard's face change in small pieces. Fear first, then memory, then the miserable arithmetic of rent, insurance, and a mother with clinic letters stacked in a shoebox because throwing them away felt like letting them win. Officer Bell, Hale repeated. Ron lowered the light an inch. Ma'am, I can't clear this bay for non-maintenance personnel. Hale's eyes narrowed. You are not being asked to clear it. I'm logging a live current hazard. There is no live current hazard. Ron swallowed. His beam dipped toward the wet floor, the exposed mast rack, the copper bridge Caleb had left uncovered. Caleb let the tool bag slip from his fingers. A wrench clattered on concrete and rolled into a shallow puddle beside the rack. The analog meter, still clipped to the coil bank, twitched. Ron saw it and took the inch the world gave him. External cruiser scans can induce charge in pre-sync analog masts, he said, voice thin but holding. Yard's safety code requires evacuation before close inspection. Hale stared at him. That code applies to active equipment. Ron pointed the flashlight at the trembling needle. Active enough for my log. One customs agent shifted back half a step. Hale's thumb stopped moving over the tablet. Vale stepped fully into the work lamp's yellow glow and placed the empty case on the courier's nose. The damaged collar at her throat sparked once beneath the sweatshirt hood. Hale's composure cracked by the width of a breath. You are in unlawful custody of protected evidence, she said to Caleb. Vale answered first. No, the evidence is no longer here. Silence took the bay. Not peace. Impact. Caleb reached the manual chain. Ron moved without looking brave and placed himself between Hale and the courier, flashlight down, shoulders tight, a man terrified enough to shake and decent enough to stay. Clear the bay, Ron said. That's my safety order. Hale lifted her tablet. You will lose your position. Ron's mouth twitched, sad and young. Then write what you saw. Caleb pulled the chain. The door dropped in jerks, rust screaming down the track. The agents stepped back under the rail as the gap narrowed. Hale did not move until the last safe second. Her face vanished behind the falling door, still calm, still furious. The latch hit concrete with a heavy lock that rolled through Caleb's bones. For a moment, no one spoke. Rain ticked through a roof seam. The meter needle settled dead. Ron stared at the closed door like his future had been sealed outside with the officers. Vale looked from him to Caleb, then to the empty case. You had no legal obligation to intervene. Ron laughed once without humor. Yeah, well, safety code's funny like that. Caleb picked up the wet wrench and nodded toward the rear wall panel. Funny, better keep walking. The rear wall panel opened into a service, throat barely taller than Caleb's shoulders and wet enough to make every step sound guilty. He went first with the work light held low because the floor dropped 6 inches after the first bend and the warning stripe had peeled away sometime during a year nobody wanted to remember. Vale followed with the empty case against her side. Ron came last, one hand on the wall, breathing through his mouth like he could already taste the job he had lost. Behind them, the bay door shook once under a controlled impact. Not a ram. Not yet. Hale was still trying to remain official. They'll pull the fire override, Ron said. Then the rear motion sensors. Rear sensors died in the ice storm, Caleb said. Which one? Pick a year. The corridor sloped into the drainage run beneath Stack C. Water spread across the floor in a dark sheet, ankle deep, carrying oil rainbows and flakes of rust toward a grate that had never done much with responsibility. The air smelled of wet concrete, old coolant, and the sharp copper bite of overloaded wiring. Vale slowed beside a wall box half buried behind conduit. Its cover read Municipal Net Relay, Do Not Remove, which meant at least 4 people had removed it before Caleb ever worked there. She knelt and opened the panel with 2 quick movements. This node still has copper ground. Caleb aimed the light for her. It's dead. Dead systems often retain manners. Ron crouched on her other side, flashlight shaking less now that fear had a task. What are you checking? Vale unfolded the black glass strip and touched it to the relay contacts. The device flickered, then showed 3 gray marks where the amber threads had been. Under them, one line pulsed white, tribunal receipt pending. Authentication queued. No injunction active. No one moved. Somewhere above, a customs voice ordered yard power cut by sections. Caleb looked at Ron's watch. 5:37 a.m. You said 6. Bill did not look up. Route K, 117 reassigns at 0600 local. Ron rubbed both hands over his face and left a dark streak along one cheek. So we rang the bell and nobody's answering. The emergency intake is automated, Vale said, but the sentence came out thinner than she wanted. It must compare the hash, the dead key, and my sealed petition. How long does that take? Caleb asked. She turned the device slightly away, not to hide it, but because watching failure in public still costs too much. I do not know. The tunnel held that confession with the drip of water from overhead pipes. Caleb set the work light on an overturned valve cover. Ron, front gate observers still tied to safety claims? Ron blinked at the change. Only if there's active seizure, named civilians present, or pending injunction the system can see. We've got 2.5. Vale looked up. Can you make it see the half? Ron hesitated. The boy from the gate came back into his face, the one who wanted a rulebook to be apparent. Then he pulled his radio, popped the service panel off with his thumbnail, and bridged 2 contacts with a bent badge clip. Mom's clinic denial got overturned because a nurse filed the wrong category on purpose, he said. I remember useful sins. The radio chirped. He spoke into it, voice uneven but clear. Gate control, Officer Bell logging live current evacuation, Bay 12, civilian witnesses present, external seizure interference contested. Static answered. Then an automated tone replied, public observation standby. Front gate only. Vale stared at him. Ron shrugged without looking at her. It's not hero stuff. It's a drop-down menu. The black glass device chimed once. All 3 looked down. The white line split, corrected, and burned blue. Temporary injunction activated. Relocation routes frozen for 12 hours. Envoy authority provisionally restored pending hearing. Tribunal response craft holding outside customs jurisdiction until public transfer. Vale's hand went to the broken collar beneath the sweatshirt. Her fingers found the cut where the seal bead had been removed. For 1 second, she looked less like an envoy restored and more like an older sister who had heard a school bus had not left. She closed her eyes once, just long enough to survive relief without letting it own her. Caleb picked up the work light. 12 hours isn't much. It is not meant to be much, Vale said, standing. It is meant to force daylight. Ron looked toward the stairs leading up near the front gate. Customs will be waiting. Yes. They'll say we obstructed. They will say many things. Vale slid the empty case into Ron's hands, surprising him. Then she pulled the broken ceramic collar from under the sweatshirt and held it bare in the work light. Private capture lets them write the story. Public surrender forces them to read mine. Caleb started up the stairs, knee clicking under him, light cutting a narrow path through damp concrete. Vale walked beside him now, not behind. At the top, morning pressed gray through the storm grates, and the front gate cameras waited where law, fear, and dirty water finally ran out of places to hide. The stairs brought them up behind the front gate booth, where dawn had thinned the storm into a gray wash over Kestrel Yard. The main entrance stood 30 yards ahead, steel bars locked under an Alliance override that pulsed red from the control box. Beyond the fence, the frontage road shone with rain. Public observer drones hovered above the ditch line in a neat legal row, blue status lights blinking from standby into record. Not curious, not merciful, just required. Officer Hale waited inside the gate with 2 customs agents and Mr. Danner, Ron's shift supervisor, who had put his hard hat on backward in the rush and looked angrier about that than the fact that his yard had become a courtroom. Hale's tablet caught the first week sunlight. Envoy Nereth, she called, her voice carried by the gate's speakers. For your safety, you will return to Alliance custody while jurisdiction is clarified. Vale walked toward her without speeding up. The Kestrel sweatshirt hung damp from her shoulders. The safety vest flashed dull orange over it. In her left hand, she held the broken diplomatic collar by its split ceramic edge. Caleb stayed on her right with the work light off, but still in his fist. Ron walked on her left with the empty case held in both hands, like it weighed more now that the truth was gone from it. Jurisdiction is clarified, Vale said. Her damaged translator clipped the first word, then steadied. Temporary injunction active. Relocation routes frozen. Tribunal response craft holding outside customs jurisdiction for public transfer. Hale's mouth moved by a fraction. A provisional administrative hold does not supersede recovery protocol. It supersedes private custody. The drones tilted closer. Their lenses focused with tiny clicks, soft as insects against glass. Hale noticed and lowered her tablet half an inch. Those observers were activated under a fraudulent safety claim. Ron swallowed. Caleb heard it from 3 feet away. Then Ron lifted his badge toward the drones. Officer Ronald Bell, Kestrel Yard Gate Security. I filed a live current evacuation after external cruiser scans interacted with precinct salvage equipment during an active inspection. Civilian witnesses present. Claim stands. Danner pointed at him. Bell, you are done here. Ron nodded once, eyes still forward. Yes, sir. Not brave. Not dramatic. Just no longer available at that price. The gate control refused Caleb's badge with another red blink. He crouched by the rusted floor plate, yanked it open, and jammed the emergency bar into the manual release socket. Fire code, he said, mostly to Hale. Old doors have to open when computers get stupid. Danner snapped. Rourke, don't you touch that. Caleb leaned his shoulder into the bar. His bad knee sparked white-hot under him. The gate rose 2 inches, enough to drag mud beneath it. Ron set the empty case down and grabbed the bar beside him. Together they forced the mechanism upward. Not clean, not easy, metal grinding like it had objections in writing. Vale knelt before the gap and placed the broken collar on the wet concrete where the drones could see the missing seal bead, the surgical cut, the little ceramic wound where a government had tried to remove her name before removing her body. Hale stepped forward. Classified material. Vale looked at the nearest drone. Public evidence of unlawful diplomatic erasure. The gate speakers carried it across the frontage road. The drone's blue lights turned steady. Above the tree line, a white tribunal shuttle descended through the thinning cloud, slower than rescue, heavier than promise. It did not erase the danger. It only forced the danger to share the record. Hale stopped walking. Her agents stopped with her. Caleb and Ron held the gate high enough for Vale to pass under, but she did not pass yet. She faced the drones, the yard, the officers, and the cruiser hidden behind torn cloud. I am Vale Nerith of the Outer Compact, she said. I surrender to the independent tribunal under emergency injunction. I name Caleb Rourke and Ronald Bell as civilian witnesses. Neither man was given classified knowledge before choosing to preserve life, evidence, and lawful review. Ron's fingers slipped on the wet bar. Caleb shifted his grip and took more weight. Vale turned just enough for them to see her face. They did not ask what I was worth, she said. They asked what needed opening. The tribunal shuttle settled outside the fence. Its ramp lowered with a soft hydraulic sigh. No anthem. No applause. Just rain ticking off metal, drones recording, and 2 ordinary men holding up a gate built to fail safely when everything smarter failed morally. Vale picked up the broken collar and stepped beneath the bars. On the other side, a tribunal officer offered a thermal blanket. She accepted it, then looked back at Caleb's mud-streaked jeans, Ron's shaking hands, and the bad coffee thermos still clipped to Caleb's tool bag because he had forgotten to put it down. My brother will ask how humans stopped a transport order, she said. Caleb let the gate settle into its locked height and flexed his aching fingers. Tell him we mostly complained at old machinery until the law had to listen. Ron gave a tired laugh that cracked in the middle. Vale held the collar against her palm, no longer wearing it, no longer needing it to prove she existed. The first clean strip of morning reached Kestrel Yard and touched the dead courier bay, the blind camera, the wet tracks leading from the fence. Nothing heroic stood there. Just evidence of people who had opened what they could, held what they had to, and left the universe less able to pretend it had not seen. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story stayed with you, leave your thoughts in the comments and tell us which moment hit hardest. Subscribe to Intergalactic Untold for more cinematic HFY stories about courage, compassion, and the quiet choices that change the universe.